what the President and the White House is doing in these areas. Thank you. And join me in welcoming.
Folks want to pop off and have opinions about what they think they would do, present a specific plan. If they think that somehow their advisors are better than the chairman of my Joint Chiefs of Staff, I want to meet them. Folks want to pop off, pop off, pop off, pop. Folks want to pop off, pop off, pop off, pop. Folks want to pop off, pop off, pop off.
I do have the coolest boss in the entire world. Kevin, you were far, far, far too kind, and I really appreciate what Operation New Hope is doing and your work on this. And Van and Cut 50, it is unbelievable what you have created here in this space on criminal justice reform and criminal justice reform issues. And many of you know the story about the chicken and the egg, and you know whether or not the egg cares enough about the issues, and you know the chicken being committed. And between Kevin and Van, we have like true commitment here. This is something that they live for and have a passion for. So let me start off. I'm really going to try to let down all of you on what Kevin said about me here. That's really my goal, and to really become probably the worst lunch speaker that you've ever had. So I actually want you to actually take out pen and paper on this and have a little bit of a discussion here, because I've gone to so many of these talks, and the problem is I walk out, I say, oh, you know, that person seemed passionate, seemed to care, and then I go about my life and my business, and I never know what was just said to me. And I want you to actually take something back from this. And so take notes as you need to. But let's start with numbers that just don't make any sense. Numbers that make absolutely no sense. Numbers like 70 million. Numbers like 25%. 2.2 million. 3 million. And 80 billion. Many of you have heard these numbers today. 70 million people, adults, who have an arrest or conviction history where they would have to check off that box if it weren't for some movement on Ban the Box in a number of places in this country. 25%. We have 5% of the world's population, yet 25% of the world's inmates. Again, a number that just makes no sense. 2.2 million. 2.2 million of our fellow human beings who are incarcerated in prisons and jails around this country. 3 million. The number of kids who are suspended out of school or expelled every year. 80 billion. That's how much it costs us every year to incarcerate the number of people we do. $80 billion. That's a bunch of numbers that just make no sense. And let me tell you the number that actually scares me the most. And that number is 428. We have 428 days until the weekend. 428 days left of the Obama administration. And we are going to work every single one of those days on issues that he cares most deeply about, and one of those issues is criminal justice reform. But 428 days is not a lot of time. It's not a lot of time at all. So this is what I want to do with this speech, because you've heard the passion from people like Shaka and Jessica and Van and Kevin. So let me just go down the list of things in the area of criminal justice reform, and just a few of them that we need to do something about in the next 428 days. I'm going to give you 24 things that we need to do something about. And I'll just number them as I'm going down, and hopefully in your spare time, and I know you're incredibly busy, and I know you're incredibly passionate, but I know it's hard to find time to do something about this, but this is about this country. and what it means to be an American and what it means to get this thing right after years and years and decades of mass incarceration and locking people up and taking away their lives and hurting their families and their communities. Number one, legislation. We have right now on the Hill something called the Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act of 2015. This is a bill that Senators Grassley, Cornyn, Whitehouse, Durbin, Lee, Booker, Leahy, all supported this bill. Okay, this isn't the biggest bill in the world. It's not going to release all the people who possibly should be released. But this is a good bill. And when you got Grassley and you got Booker and you got Durbin and you got Cornyn all supporting something, you got Schumer all supporting something, it's worth something. And on the front end, it's going to lower the number of people who are locked up. We're going to retroactively apply the Fair Sentencing Act. That's going to affect thousands of people. On the back end, we're going to start giving people real good time credits. We're going to make sure that BOP, the Bureau of Prisons, actually has some good, solid, evidence-based reentry programs. And we're going to do a little something. We're going to do a little something about juvenile justice there and talk about expungements of juvenile records and get rid of juvenile solitary where we can. Okay, these are big deal things. Now we can sit around playing around the edges and start talking about, well, we want this in this bill or we want this out of this bill. But we're probably going to have one good solid chance for real comprehensive criminal justice reform. And I'm not sure that we have much more than this to go for. And this is a first step. And getting those people getting right and left behind a piece of legislation is a big deal. So that's number one. Number two, school discipline. The best re-entry program is no entry program. Okay? We can't keep sending kids to jail, to secure detention, to whatever it is. 3 million kids suspended or expelled. You know what happens. You get suspended one day, you're out of school, and all of a sudden you can't catch up. You don't know what to do next. You give up, you throw your hands up. Next thing you know, you're out of school permanently. The best punishment for a kid who is bad in school is more school. Okay? The best punishment. We have to provide our teachers and our administrators with the tools to keep kids in school. We're not doing that right now. We're giving up on kids. We know what the brain science says. We know what it's like to go to college and act the fool. Luckily, we didn't end up where they did. But we have to do something about school discipline. There's school discipline guidance that the Department of Education, Department of Justice put out. Every single school district in America needs to look at that so we're not pushing our kids out of school. Number three, the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. There's a bill in Congress right now that has bipartisan support that is going to help us lower the 50,000 kids right now who are in secure juvenile detention. That bill needs to pass. The Task Force on 21st Century Policing. So President Obama sat there and watched what was happening in Ferguson and in Baltimore and around this country between our police and our communities. Saw the pain. Brought together police chiefs, representatives of police unions, youth who were out there on the streets, academics, activists, and they came together and put together 59 recommendations of what can do, like 59 concrete recommendations that every one of our 18,000 police departments could be working on right now to improve community and police relations. You improve community and police relations, you will have fewer people in jail. You will have a real sense of justice on the streets. There's no excuse for not doing this. That's number four. Included in that is body cameras. Look, I know there are a lot of issues about the privacy of body cameras and a lot of issues about, what camera should I use? But at the end of the day, a lot of the injustice that we see today, we would never know it happened if it weren't for somebody with a video camera on it. We've got to get body cameras to show exactly what's happening. Number five, prosecutors. I was a longtime prosecutor. I did everything from shoplifting to homicide cases to fraud and public corruption cases to human trafficking cases. I understand the importance of having good, strong prosecutors. But I also understand that the same bias that everybody else has exists in our prosecutors. And you have some real courageous prosecutors like Cy Vance in New York, John Chisholm in Milwaukee, who showed their hand, put it out there, said, hey, come look at what I'm doing, look at what my prosecutor's doing, and determine whether or not there's bias in how we are prosecuting cases, whether or not we're being more harsh on black kids or black men, or white kids and white men, or black women, whatever it is. Disaggregate my data, show me what we're doing, tell us what we have to do better. Every prosecutor's office around the country should be doing this. Take a look. You don't know the answers. This is not saying that you're a racist. Let's get over that. Let's move beyond that. Doesn't matter whether you're a black prosecutor or a white prosecutor. Doesn't matter whether you're a black police officer or a white police officer. There's bias. Recognize it. Understand that there are things you can do about that. That's number 5. Number 6, we brought a group to the White House to talk about alternatives to incarceration. This is, again, I'm still on the no entry piece of this talk. Called Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. It's a program that we've seen out in Seattle. We know El Paso is doing it. Albany, New York is looking at it. This is police officers taking people off the street and taking them right into programming, mental health programming, addiction programming. Not only do they never get a record, they never get a photo. They're never booked. They're taken straight into these programs. And there are other programs like this. But here's police officers recognizing that this low-level offender does not need jail, they need help. So how do we provide them with that help? And how do we find ways to grow programs that are doing this for our communities? Because everyone in this room knows exactly what happens when you arrest somebody. Number 7, fines and fees. I heard the discussion up here. We know this is true. You can't fine a poor person $25, double it to $50, boot their car, and then be real surprised that they've lost their job. Okay, you can't do that. But we do that. We have numbers that make no sense, and we have policies that make no sense. This is a policy that makes absolutely no sense. We've got to be better. We've got to be honest about when we need, if we need money for the new park, then we need to be honest about how we do it. We don't need to put this on the back of some poor people and then lock them up and start that cycle. So we're going to do a convening at the White House on December 3rd to talk about fines and fees. Find out what we can do about it. Number 8, sexual abuse to prison pipeline. Okay. We know an enormous number of our girls and women who are in the criminal justice system were sexually abused. At the time they were sexually abused, they were not treated as the victims that they are. So whatever that trauma did to them has a real big part in whatever happens later in their life. Well, we have to treat them like victims. We have to give them the care that they need. We have to end the sexual abuse and the sexual assaults and the domestic violence. So we have to figure out a plan to do this. We got 428 days that I know about for certain that we will be doing this. Number 9, raise the age. How are we still thinking about 16 and 17-year-olds as adults in 9 states in this country? That's insane. I mean, we have someone as courageous as Governor Malloy in Connecticut talking about maybe we should be talking about 21 and 25. And yet we still have 9 states that are treating 16 and 17-year-olds automatically as adults. Yeah, kids do dumb things, but they also have an enormous opportunity to change. But once you lock them up and once you take away their hope, most can't bounce back. So that's a big, tangible thing that we can fix this year. We need to do that. Number 10, mental health. Our prisons and jails, we know this, are full of people with mental health concerns. Yet we prefer to spend $80 billion locking people up than spend whatever millions of dollars it would be to actually get them the help they need. We are this short-term society. Okay, well, the quickest thing I can do is just lock them up. Well, that has long-term injurious effects to all of us. So let's take a real close look at mental health. So December 14th and 15th, at the in Washington, D.C., we'll be talking about mental health in the criminal justice system and bringing in some of the best people we can find to talk about more that we can do on that. Number 11, opioids. So there was a time when we could kind of bury some of the drug problems and who it was impacting and the impact that it was having. We can't do that anymore, folks. We should have never done it, but we definitely can't do it anymore because we're seeing kids of every color, every economic strata, every community dying. It's not just an addiction where you act silly. This is death. People are starting to pick up and take notice of this. I mean, there's simple things that we can do, like prescription drug buyback, because kids are having these pill parties where they're raiding their parents' medicine cabinets, taking all the pills, throwing them in a big vase or jar or bowl, and picking out the pills. Well, why are they doing that? They're doing that because they're there. Get the prescription drugs out of your house if you're not using them. That's a simple solution. Have your community, my community, Tacoma Park, Maryland, the People's Republic of Tacoma Park, as some people might call it. It's crazy enough to let someone like Van Jones live there. But they have a permanent box in their police station where any time of the day, 24/7, you can drop off prescription drugs that you don't need anymore. That's a start. But this is a hard problem. Heroin is cheaper than your prescription drugs, more potent than it. We got to stop people before they start. So there's a huge opioid problem, and the president went to West Virginia to talk about it, and we're going to keep talking about it till we're done. So that's a little bit of our no entry work, the best reentry policy there is. Let's talk about when people end up in prison, because people will end up in prison. Number 12, Pell for prisoners. Department of Education, despite the fact that Congress said we're not going to provide Pell grants for adults who are incarcerated, realized that they had the authority to do experiments. And so they set up this experimental program. They just offered it up a few months ago. 200 educational institutions have written in saying that they want to participate. I don't think they're going to have the ability to give all 200 of those who want this. But again, this is just common sense. We know for a fact that when people have an education, they're less likely to get in trouble. When people have an education, when they get out, they're going to have a chance to get that job. This is just plain old common sense. This is simple, and it doesn't cost us that much money. And the fact that anyone on the Hill would be complaining about this is crazy, but that's the Hill. But anyway, Pell for prisoners is something that we're working on. We gotta land this one. Number 13, skills. So when you have people in prison, don't waste that opportunity to teach them some job skills. We have to have those programs. And people are like, well, you're giving prisoners and bad people jobs. And come on now, how many people who are out there who don't have a record are just lucky? They just didn't get caught doing that stupid thing. I'll raise my hand. I know. I was lucky. So we have something right now called federal prison industries that is suffering because of this whole idea that you don't give prisoners jobs to take from good, hard-working Americans. Guess who's in our prison? Good, hard-working Americans. So we need to find a way to make programs like that work around the country. Number 14, it's called RDAP, Residential Drug Abuse Program. It's a program in federal prison that provides prisoners with good time credit when they complete addiction and mental health and drug programming. So the Bureau of Prisons put out a rule to help to expand that program because it actually works. It's actually lowering our recidivism numbers. By the way, let's talk just a touch about our recidivism numbers. We right now in the federal system have about a 40% recidivism rate after 3 years. In state and locals, it's 60%. There's no word for that but dumb. We have so many different programs and ways, and that's what you guys have been talking about for the last few days, that will help people not recidivate, and yet we don't do it. Well, RDAP is one of those programs that we need to find ways to expand it to give more prisoners that opportunity and that hope, because 40% recidivism is crazy. And number 15 for the in-prison part of this list is solitary confinement. It makes no sense. It's not punishment, it's just laziness. You're gonna lock someone up in a cell for years, no human contact or barely any. And sometimes you're going to release them straight from solitary right onto the street. And then you're going to be real surprised. Oh my God, they recidivated. I mean, it's just, we do this over and over again. It's like, come on now, people. I mean, if kids were running our government, they'd come up with better solutions to our problems. But we've got to do something about it. And the president has directed the attorney general to take a real close look at our use of solitary confinement in this nation. And hopefully a report will be coming out sometime soon, and everyone needs to be spending the next 428 days finding ways to implement it, because it's not helping people get better. It goes right back to the mental health piece. So that's 15. 16, let's talk about states for a second. So the federal government, so there are 2.2 million people who are locked up in this country. Only 0.2 of those are in the federal system. It's 2 million of them are in the state and local system. So what do we have to do about them? So there's something called the Justice Reinvestment Initiative, JRI. So JRI is about, if you stop locking up so many people, you will save money, and then you can reinvest that money into things that really work in keeping people out in the first place. There are about 19 states doing it right now. If you do the math, or I'm going to try to do the math in my head right now, I think that makes 31 who aren't quite getting it. So let's get them involved in this thing. In other words, if you don't lock up people, you save money, you can spend that money on other things. Again, pretty simple. Number 17, the Second Chance Act. So we have another piece of legislation, bipartisan support, that just needs to be passed. And this is the work you're doing. This is money, grants to state and local agencies, organizations that are getting it right on reentry. So let's get this bill passed. That's 17. 18, let's talk about the community. So the president announced federal ban the box. That's huge. And it is an example that everyone should be looking at right now. Giving that person who has that record a chance to get a job. Let them go into that interview and prove themselves. So we have a bunch of states who need to move forward on this, and a bunch of private businesses that need to move forward. A lot have come forward already. You have Koch Industries, you have Target, you have Facebook, you have Home Depot, Ben & Jerry's, Johns Hopkins Medical Center. They've all banned the box. It's time to just ban the box. It's time. Number 19, federal legislation on banning the box. Senators Booker and Johnson, Republican, Democrat, have some legislation on the Hill that talks about this. Let's take a close look at that legislation, see if it's doing what we need it to do, and get it passed. Number 20, restoration of rights. You've done your time, you've paid your debt. It should not be a permanent scarlet letter on you. Let them vote. That's it. Let them vote. Number 21, HUD rule. So the president just announced this when he went and visited a reentry center and sat down with some formerly incarcerated people in Newark, New Jersey. So HUD made it absolutely clear that an arrest alone does not bar anyone from public housing, and that they've never had what's called a first strike rule. Okay? Part of the reason why my job has so many pieces to it is simply the fact that, okay, you can't have criminal justice if you don't have a house, and you don't have a job, and you don't have an education. You got to have them all together. And so I get a chance to kind of look at all of these things together. Well, the HUD rule is a start. Give somebody a roof over their head so that they can start to rebuild their lives. 22, just grants and loans. You heard from my good friend Ben Siegel in one of the breakout sessions from Department of Labor. Department of Labor under Tom Perez is doing some phenomenal stuff on grants and loans. providing money for individuals and for businesses that are trying to get this right. SBA just came out with a new rule where they expanded their small business loans to people who are formerly incarcerated. Number 23, licensing. So we have about 60 licenses that are the same across the country. Then we have about 1,000 plus others that are just kind of whatever a state wants to do. This is the whole thing with the barbershop and the hair washer, where sometimes if you can't work in a barbershop because you have a criminal record. That fits the category of dumb. And we just need to stop doing that. And every state needs to take a real close look at all of their work on licensing. And does a license really have to bar someone who has a criminal record? You know who's in fact impacted the most by this licensing silliness? It's military spouses. Because their spouse is in the military and bouncing all around, and they're there in the first place, and they get a job, and they go through everything they need to get that license, and then they get bumped to a new state, and they're like, oh, your license doesn't count here. So it's hurting a lot of people. So let's take a close look at these licenses. Let's back them up and make them have some common sense to them. And then 24 is data. So our criminal justice data is, in fact, the worst data we have probably in this country. We just put out our 2014 Uniform Crime Report statistics. Not a lot of people are concerned about what happened in 2014 right now. We just, a week ago, put out our 2014 hate crime statistics. Our 2014 hate crime statistics showed that 16,000 law enforcement agencies reported to the hate crime system. 14,000 of them said that they had 0 or 1 hate crime in 2014. Now, I know we are post-racial. I know President Obama has fixed everything. But I'm not sure that if you look at every black, brown, Muslim, Arab, Sikh, South Asian, LGBT individual, that you have a bunch of places that got 0 hate crimes. But those are the numbers that are put out. We have questions right now about how many people are shot or killed by police officers. And the federal government's official numbers were about 400. And then the Washington Post went and just counted what was in papers and found it was closer to 1,000. But the official number is 400. We want to know crime in America right now, and we have no idea. I can tell you right now exactly how many yards some Jaguars player got. It's not a lot, but you know. Sorry, I forgot my audience. Let me. But I can do that. But that's all right. No. I'll stay. Sorry. I didn't mean Jaguars. I meant Titans. Some Titans player. But how do we not know how much violent crime is in our communities? How do we not know how many sexual assaults are in our communities? There was a report recently that Chicago was able to fudge its homicide numbers. That's pretty good. But a problem. What we're trying to do, and we keep talking about data-driven, evidence-based, we need numbers. We need real numbers. So when you are out there working on these programs, we need a way to make sure that these programs work. We've got to do better. There's something called the National Incident-Based Reporting System, NIBRS, that starts to dig deep into these numbers. We have about 40% of the population using them right now. There's no reason why everybody doesn't use them. We need to start transferring to them. We got every single major law enforcement organization saying that we should move to these numbers. If you're in a community that is not using NIBRS, you need to have a conversation and figure it out. So I hope that I've been successful in being the most boring lunchtime speaker that you've ever had. I simply wanted to come here and give you a laundry list of what I know this administration and this president is going to be doing for the next 428 days. But I know that this is the work that, the people who are in this room are I'm not just preaching to the choir, I'm preaching to the preachers. But I wanted to give you a list that you can take out there and proselytize and tell people these things need to change. Because in this country, we're better than that. Thank you very much.